Welcome to Behind the Baton number 7. This is my favorite one though, because I get to kibitz with my son Julian. Because I thought what we would do today is talk about something to do with string playing, but it really has to do with all of us that care about orchestras and love orchestral music, because you're watching the string players and they're going like that. And what does it mean to go down and up? Reminds me of a story. When I was in the Philharmonic, there was a bassoon player who was talking about orchestral slang. And he said, we say things like, as it comes. And so some kid who said, what does that mean? He says, it just means play it along. Julian, what does as it comes mean?
As it comes means you play alternating down and up bows for every note. Sort of.
Yeah, or if it's just what's written without any alteration.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's better. That's better explanation.
So, if it's bom, 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 you wouldn't go bom, bom, bom. You go bom, 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 as it comes. So, little things like that. Even a bassoon player in the New York Philharmonic, a brilliant player, brilliant guy, didn't know what as it comes means. So now everybody knows what as it comes means. And what we're going to talk about today is the bow. Now, I'm not going to talk about, or Julian's not going to talk about, how to hold the bow, because that's a cello issue. What's an issue for musicians, of course, I guess holding the bow is an issue for musicians, but for us, conductors, audience, composers, players, is what do you do with it? So we assume that you're gripping the bow properly.
Okay.
Okay. So when you place it on the string, why do you place it? Where do you place it? So here's the fingerboard, and there's the bridge. Where do you place it?
Well, you should probably place the bow where your fingers aren't going to come into contact with it, because that would create issues. So that's why when you see a cellist or a violinist play with the bow, it's closer to the bridge, because you're not using your fingers as frequently close to the bridge. That said, you can place your bow anywhere on the string and get a tone. It's just the quality of the tone. Quality of the tone is much nicer, nearer to the points of tension. So the bridge is the point of most tension in the string. So the closer to it you use your bow, the clearer the tone, usually. And that's all about placement.
So why don't you, just for a moment, why don't you play a note with the same pressure and the same speed, over the fingerboard and then close to the bridge without the...
Okay.
Huge difference. And what we notice as conductors, we notice where do the players, what placement do they use? I'm a big believer in double basses playing close to the bridge. I like clarity, I like the brightness that you get. This over the fingerboard, it creates a very covered, fluffy kind of sound that can be useful in French music. Can you give us an example with a fast bow of something? Or just a scale, anything?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Beautiful. Now play that with a little more pressure closer to the bridge.
Slower bow.
But isn't that, it's interesting, the huge difference.
Sure.
So as a performer, you have a choice. How do you want this color, or do you want that color? Where, and as a conductor, so you have 10 or 12 cellos, you have a lot. I mean, you say play here or you play there, the whole thing changes. If everybody, now, usually we're not studying we're not checking it all out, but I love to check it out. I think it's really fun.
Well, placement, speed, and pressure are the most important factors in making color. And I mean of the bow. And different combinations make different colors. And if you said it was one person playing it, if it's magnified if you have 12 cellos or 16 first violins playing with a certain bow speed. Now, for a solo instrument, it's easier to make colors that are sometimes softer with a lot of bow, because you can get that wispy kind of color. But, as you often point out, if a whole section does that, it gets very loud very quickly. And the reason is that the hair of the bow is the string player's air, right? So you as originally a wind player or brass player or singers, the amount of air you use contributes to the resonance of the tone. So the more bow you use also is the equivalent. The more resonance you get of the tone.
Depending upon the speed.
Yes, the more bow meaning faster bow.
Okay,
Right.
so now we've dealt with one thing, which is the placement. So now
Right.
everybody knows basically what that means. Okay, now let's talk about down and up, because that's what everyone talks about all the time.
Right.
So we start down bow at the frog, and we start up bow at the tip.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Let's just do it that way, though. Thank
Okay.
you. He's always correcting me, just so you know. He's always doing it.
So
Give me a down bow at the frog.
So a down bow at the frog down bow means the direction of the bow, not where you start the okay.
Now up bow, the same. Now there's a fallacy among conductors, string players too, that down bow means decrescendo and up bow means crescendo. Would I be accurate in saying that it's easier to make a decrescendo down bow and easier to make a crescendo up bow?
Absolutely. The tendency of the bow is that since the weight of your hand and the weight of the bow is at the frog, and this is the frog, that when you put it on the string, you have the most natural weight in the string. When you have it at the tip, your hand is so far removed that there's very little weight out there. So the tendency is, that's just the natural tendency of the bow, like this. Right? And what we have to do as string players is fight against the natural tendencies of the bow. So ideally, down bow, up bow should sound the same. Down bow should not necessarily be a decrescendo or diminuendo. Up bow should not necessarily be a crescendo, but it's so much harder. So in order to get the weight to simulate the weight of the frog at the tip, you need to have incredible contact. If you see the string moving and wiggling, that's requiring an immense amount of pressure. But if I'm here, it's very easy.
So do me a favor, play me a nice, any down bow note with a crescendo.
Okay.
Now do the same thing with a decrescendo and an up bow. Right. That's what string players have to practice, clearly. I mean, from Mozart's time, he would give, Leopold Mozart I'm talking about now, would give exercises in his book about doing that, making a crescendo down bow, or making a swell, or whatever, just as an exercise so you can control the bow. All right, I think that's pretty good.
That's
okay,
good.
Now let's talk about pressure. Okay, so what we call into the string, or the opposite, let's call flautando. Okay, so let's talk to us about what into the string means.
Well, into the string means that you're using more weight to direct into the string. So more pressure means that a lot of people think that equates to louder, but that's not really the case, because if I play with this speed and that pressure and I use much more pressure, it becomes it's too much for the string to handle. So with the more pressure you put, the more speed you need to compensate so the string actually speaks. The exception to that is when you play very close to the bridge, you can use a lot of pressure and maintain a very slow bow, but you see how it has no resonance. So weight and into the string does not necessarily mean louder, but it feels like you're...
And the quality of the sound is a little different.
Is different,
Yeah.
and it's lacking, and it's more constricted.
Right. But not necessarily that. People think that if you use a lot of bow, that means you're really involved. Well, I've seen lots of orchestras where they use so much bow, they're just musically making terrible mistakes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess.
So now show us flautando now, the opposite.
So flautando is as fast and light and out of the string as possible, like the demonstration of the French piece, which is a floaty bow. The key to flautando is that you cannot let the overtones or the harmonics speak. So if I went and you hear the upper part partials of the note speaking instead of the fundamental of the note. So there's a careful balance where in the flautando you need to make sure that, see, I lost it just for a moment, without it actually losing the center of the pitch.
Great. Okay, now, so we've talked about placement of the bow. We've talked about down and up. Now let's talk about down and up, as you mentioned correctly, that down bow doesn't mean start at the frog.
Right.
What I find as a conductor so often is if you have a passage, let's say, that has an upbeat and you're doing it bom, bim, bom, bom, or something like that,
Right.
someone will play bom, bom, instead of bom, bim.
So I'll demonstrate. So
Thank you.
that means that if you see the symbol for down bow, which is like a little hat, that means that you started the frog. No, here's a down bow. So the down bow is the direction. So if I'm moving in this direction, it's a down bow. Right? So this is an up bow here, starting there. But most people would play or so there are very many places that you can start. In a lot of your orchestral parts, it specifies upper half, lower half, tip. So you can write a down bow and say tip, and you can play.
Great, great. Now, let's talk about distribution.
Okay.
Okay. So now, when we talk about down up, then just like what Julian did now when he played down up, that's about distribution. If he went this way, the distribution is he's using for a short note, he's playing the whole bow, and for a long note as a slow bow, it's a mess.
Right.
So you, in a way, what I like is, what I refer to a lot is even bow speed. I'm not a great fan of using fast bow where it doesn't make any musical sense.
Right.
So for me, you see a lot of people at the ends of a phrase, you're playing da da dee da da, and they use a whole bow when dee da dee da da. I mean, just the same speed. If you play any phrase and the last note use a lot of bow, can you do that?
Well, I can make it sound good or not.
Make it sound bad.
Make it sound bad.
Yeah.
So so if you played something like.
Yeah, bad. Now do it. Make it sound good. Now make it sound consistent. Everyone see that? I mean, it's really interesting because that was the same bow speed on all the notes. A little more pressure, but the speed was the same, so you're not getting these artificial, unmusical things that we hear so often.
The key, because you think about bow distribution so much, and that's probably
He's
why.
he's criticizing me now.
No, that's why I think about bow distribution so much, which is that if we think of the bow as the bow hair as being the air that we're working with, you want to use the most air on the climax of the phrase or on the most important note of the phrase. So the bow distribution should work that the bow speed gets faster as you want to expand the resonance and slower as you want to decrease the resonance. Unfortunately, for our feeling as string players, we feel like the climax we need to really dig into the string, when in fact it's the opposite. We need to dig in, let me demonstrate. So if I want to go, meaning the second of the three notes is my key note. Then I'll use a slow bow on the upbeat, use a very fast bow on the note I want to be important, and then slow down the bow on the resolution. So I'd go, right, using the bow distribution in that way. But somebody who wouldn't be thinking about it or thinking about how they feel and not necessarily how it sounds would use a lot of bow on the upbeat. They would go. So it feels like you're really getting that second note to be core sound, but you're actually stripping the resonance, so it sounds.
Also unmusical.
Well, the intention I think is musical, but it's thinking about more how it feels and not how it actually sounds.
Now I want to talk about distribution a little more. I want you to play for me in F major, the second violin opening. This is a quiz, by the way. Baton First Symphony.
The second movement.
All right.
So
Just play it normally. Good. Now,
I'm trying to
so do this.
play it
Now,
not well.
now do it with, play it a little softer, do it with letting the bow travel, which is to say, 2 notes in one bow, then 1 note, a little less bow, then 2 notes, a little more, less. So in other words, rather than 2 notes in this speed, and then 1 note in that speed, it's back, how about this way? And so that the bow is what we call the bow's now travel.
Right. I'll play it, but it's important to note that as string players, we have a fascination with wanting to begin things at either end of the bow. So that's a reason that we would play going back to the frog, because we have this desire to get back there. It's very hard to even at your request to allow the bow to travel, which means starting it progressively farther and farther. So it would be.
And that's a big one, because that bum 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 is what you usually hear. Another example would be with what I would call bad bow distribution is Heldenleben, because this comes up all the time. Can you play a little bit of the beginning?
That's a hard one, yeah. So
so you heard. He's using what I would say bad bow distribution.
it's such a hard one, though, because I've tried really to figure that one out, and it's difficult, because all the long notes, you can't really use more than 1 bow on the long notes.
But you have to use a slow bow. Try it.
Yeah, okay, it's okay.
Yeah, but that's, I mean...
But it's not as loud, because you're not using as much bow.
Well, do it again.
But it's only forte, right?
It's only forte. Smart boy. Do it and use a fast bow on the long notes, just so we can see it again.
Okay. So it's the constant jerk where for this much duration, for a much smaller duration, I'm using the same amount of bow than I've used for a much larger duration. So then for the large duration, I have to play with a very slow bow, which of course strips the resonance, and then I get the resonance in for those small beats, which doesn't make musical sense. But then again, I've talked to you about Strauss bowings, and you say that Strauss never wrote a bowing in his life. Is that true?
That's as far as I'm aware.
That's what I think. I think that the interesting thing about that is, as a string player, to differentiate between slurs and bowings.
Correct.
And that is so difficult. We see slurs on the page and we want to adhere to them as bowings. But very rarely, if ever, unless your piece is written by someone who played your instrument, I'm thinking Baton or Popper or things like this, usually slurs are not bowings.
Correct. The one composer who I feel like 90% of the time he really understood and wrote great bowings was Prokofiev. So if you look at Prokofiev's symphonies, he works it out almost always, so the bowings really work. If you know what part of the bow to play on and how much bow to use. He'll say in the classical symphony, dum bum ba-dum bum da-dum at the tip, and most orchestras want to play it in the middle of the bow. They go bum ba-dum bum. But if you do what he writes, dum bum ba-dum bum, it's perfect. Then bum bum bum, then let the bow travel, and then play off the string. I mean, I think he's one of the great ones. And often Stravinsky is too, because he had people to advise him, but Prokofiev almost always. Okay, so now we've talked about speed, we've talked about, should we talk about off and on?
Okay.
Or use something else you want to talk
No,
about?
off and on's good.
Okay, so explain what off and on means.
Well, there are different types of articulation for the bow, depending on what the composer writes and depending on the speed of the piece. So the two main things that we learn mainly as children is legato and staccato. So something's long or something's short. but there are different variations within that in terms of speed. So basically, what off the string means technically is that the bow is coming off the string, as opposed to, right? But there are so many different versions of that, and it doesn't necessarily take it to come off the string for it to be short. So off and on doesn't necessarily refer to length. It refers to what's happening with the bow. That said, some strokes like that sound off, but the hair is not leaving the string. The
hair is not leaving the string. It's just the wood bouncing.
Just the wood bouncing. So that's another way to think about it. And if you think about staccato, up bow staccato and down bow staccato comes to mind, something like that, where you're stopping the bow in slight increments. So the sound is stopping, and so it's not legato, it's short, but the bow is not actually coming off the string. In general, the more you put the bow off the string, especially in the string section, the more inconsistent the bounces will be, because you are allowing your arm and the bow to make the lengths for you instead of deliberately making the lengths yourself like that.
And the other thing too to think about, especially with bass players, is that when you bounce, when you're coming off the string, it rings. Mm-hmm. If you're playing staccato, with keeping the hair on the string, it actually can stop.
So I demonstrate that by showing that there's an element of ring. But if I go, that has stopped the string. So if I go, there's much less resonance than, because in between each little stroke, there's this resonance that happens.
And then where you play, especially off, is huge also, because you don't generally play off at the tip. You can, but you generally don't. Generally you play off in the middle of the bow. Everybody's a little different about what that spot is. And when you play off at the frog, it's a whole nother quality of sound. Just give us a few examples. Let's play off at the tip now, just anything, some Rossini type.
Like throwing the bow, like jeté, like a ricochet at the tip, or
like that. Hear the sound,
like that.
The sound of that. It's a completely different sound.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But I don't know.
He said I was right.
I don't know if you would ever use that ever, though. Probably.
Well, you do sometimes in Rossini.
So, but then.
You don't use that. I've never used it.
I use that.
Did it work for? But you weren't quite as close as you were the time before.
Well, it was on a different string. All right. So, but just before we leave this, the most important thing about playing off and on is that the easiest place for a string player to play off the string is at the balance point of the bow, which is, I don't know, which is about here.
But it's different.
It's different on each bow,
but it's in that area.
But that is the point where it's most natural for the bow to bounce.
Great. All right, now
from Kevin Reed.
Kevin Reed, I just
Reed.
heard Kevin Reed's the first horn in
Jacksonville. Read the question.
Julian sounded incredible last week. Oh, good. Why is the second concerto of Shostakovich performed far less than the first? Very good, Kevin. Well, before you, Kevin and my wife Jody was at the concert and said he sounded unbelievable throughout the whole concert. And they did the Hanson second with huge horn solos. And Jody said he played like a god. Is that okay to say? I guess it's okay. Anyway, thanks, Kevin.
Even more impressive than the Hanson was the On the Waterfront by Bernstein, with those incredible elaborate horn calls, and they were really just. It's hard to imagine them being played any better. Kevin's
a horn player, so the first concerto was much more popular because of big horn part.
Well, actually, the second concerto has tons of horn stuff too, as well. But
there are other wind instruments in the second.
I think that the reason the first concerto of Shostakovich is played far more than the second is that I do believe it's less depressing. So a lot of later Shostakovich, I mean, It's why the 8th string quartets played far more than the 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th string quartets, because there's this sinking feeling that I get when I hear a lot of late Shostakovich, and the second cello concerto is the same. There's also a lot of slow music in the second cello concerto, as opposed to the first cello concerto, where it feels more like a journey.
And it's a great audience pleaser, the first, much more than the second. I've only done the second a few times, but the audiences do not respond as enthusiastically, no matter how great the performance is, they don't respond as enthusiastically for the second as for the first.
I also think that the great cadenza in the first Shostakovich concerto is really key to the success of that piece.
Absolutely.
Because it's really the cello as sort of somebody speaking to the audience and telling a story on that journey, and I think it's very compelling how it's written, and it fits so well together, so cohesive as a unit.
So we're going to stop talking about the bow, and as Julian says, he's my guinea pig, and because he's my son, I can convince him to actually come and do things like this. Next time we're going to deal with the right hand and
Left hand.
Oh, excuse me, the left hand. He's always correcting me. The left hand, to talk about vibrato, talk about slides, talk about the choice of string,
Very
talk about another aspect of the color.
Yes.
But in the meantime, we have a bunch of questions from you all. Do you often come to each other for musical advice? No.
I do.
Oh, do you?
I come to my father for musical advice all the time, and he's basically been my musical education in a very comprehensive way. So I've learned so much from my father, and I always go for musical advice, for phrasing, to play a piece for him. When I know I've done something wrong, he says, "Why didn't you play that for me before you played the concert?" Because then I know that you would have changed something or insisted on something. Sometimes you ask me for a fingering.
I ask you for a lot of things. Fingering, when I'm writing pieces, checking on what's playable, what's not playable. Recently, a recording I made when I was in my early 20s, maybe I was a teenager, called The French Influence, a trumpet recording. And I got it, and I sent it to Julian to listen to. I said, "Do you think it's good enough to be released?" And
Well, that was easy.
that was easy. Okay, well, you know what? We didn't talk about hooked bow.
Hooked and shoe shine, and as it comes.
Next.
I'll quickly do it.
Okay.
Very quickly. In a dotted rhythm, where there's usually a dotted 8th and a 16th, there are inherent problems in terms of how you play it on the bow. And there are 3 main ways. The first way is as it comes. As you say, as it comes. Down, up, down, up, down. Then there's the opposite, which we call the shoe shine bowing, which is up, down, up, down, up. And then there's what's called hooked bowing, where we do 2 notes on the down and then 2 notes on the up. So, and that is hooked bowing.
Do that Beethoven First Symphony again that we were talking about with the bow speed, and do it hooked.
Oh, so now I'm not talking about a dotted rhythm. With that is. So basically, hooked meaning you continue on a different note with a separate articulation in the same direction of bow.
But then it's also very hard sometimes to match the quality of the sound at the upper part of the bow and the lower part of the bow, and that's often the issues that we have to deal with.
So in the Rachmaninoff cello sonata, you have the choice of hooking or. Much easier to get a clear and beautiful articulation on separate bows than trying to stop the bow and re-articulate within a certain bowing.
Maybe we'll do another session on bow, because there's so much more to talk. It's all coming to me now. Okay. Was there pressure as a child of a great conductor, who wrote this, and a talented flutist, as your mother, to become
I would say great flutist, too.
Great flutist, to become a professional musician?
No, I would say probably the opposite. I was encouraged I think both my parents encouraged me to pursue other things than music because it was so easy for, I think, the pressure to be felt. So they knew that I was exposed to music so much more than any other discipline as a child. So they wanted to make sure that I knew that I could do anything I wanted to do. And so there was no pressure in that way. The pressure was mainly my own, that I really wanted to do it. And of course, my brother is a wonderful musician, but not a classical musician. So I'm the only classically inclined of of the four siblings. So I would say that, well, they didn't feel the pressure. I didn't feel the pressure. So.
And to do it, as we all know, you have to really believe in it. You have to love it. It has to mean the most to you, or don't bother. In the case of a difference in musical opinions, who takes precedent, father or son? Although not likely, if the musical roles were switched, with Julian conducting and me as a soloist, would that change? So, this really leads to the discussion of the relationship between soloist and conductor. And so my feeling is that almost always the soloist takes precedent over the conductor, almost always. The conductor can make suggestions, I've said this before. The younger the soloist, the more suggestions one can make. Someone who's distinguished, if they ask you, you can, but basically you follow their, what do you think? That sound right?
Well, that sounds right to me. I think our relationship is a little bit different because I feel that there's much more opportunity for you to be candid with me about.
Oh, and both ways, and you with me.
Well, I have very little to complain about.
So, me too. As a father of a clearly talented musician, was it difficult to decide how involved to be in Julian's music education as he was growing up and his unique musical identity as it was evolving? My feeling about these things are very simple. You respond. I've had a lot of assistant conductors when I was in Seattle. I never told them anything. I would respond to their request of me. What do you think of this? What do you think? I'd spend hours with them. But if they didn't ask me any questions, it's not my business. On occasion, I would say, you might want to consider something. So, I mean, I think basically, I was only involved as much as Julian would ask. And you ask me questions about career or about playing or about anything, I'm happy to, but I rarely, on occasion, but I rarely.
Well, I think it's a lot of, the product of a musical education is what you hear. So if you hear something you like, or you hear something over and over again, you're more likely to like it. So a lot of my musical tastes have, without question, been informed by all of the hundreds upon hundreds of performances of yours I've heard. So as far as influence in that way, music is learned by listening and by what works and what doesn't work through listening. So me listening to all your performances informed my musical taste, of course, and hearing, well, the performances of all my family members who are musicians also informs, really informs my musical identity more than talking.
Well, the next time we will be performing together. Actually, we did a few things together, but not so much. This weekend, though, at Bars Music, we're not actually playing together, but Julian and Mark Peskanoff are playing 3 duos that I wrote.
Yeah.
In fact, they're
very hard
for the first time today. I mean, I'm very excited.
I am excited too.
And what did I tell you about what's required
to make a performance of it and to really sell it? I mean, to believe in to make a great performance of any music, you need to believe in it, or at least have the commitment to showing a belief in it into the audience. So I'm very excited about that.
But it's not me saying, oh, do this, do that.
No.
Sure, man. I've written the piece. I'm done.
That's because you've worked with so many composers that are picky.
Now it's yours. Yours.
But I just don't get to play with my father as much as I'd like. So he's the greatest conductor I've ever worked with, but I don't get to work with him very much.
It goes both ways. That's the greatest cellist I've ever
Oh
heard.
well, but seriously, I wish we could play more together. people I think probably would assume that we get to more chances than we actually do.
Yeah, we did a concert in Brisbane not too long ago, and you did Elgar Concerto with me, and the concert was advertised at Schwarz and Schwarz. They sold out, both 3 performances, I think. And then the question about the duos coming up this weekend. The first 2 I wrote in 2008 when I was made the Citizen of the Year in Seattle, and they were played then by Julian and the Consummation of the Symphony, Maria Larianoff. It's hard to call those public performances. They were, but it was like as a celebration, because as being the first citizen, they said, okay, you have to do something. What can you do? And bring the orchestra in. I mean, it's very hard. So I made these duos, and then I added the 3rd. I finished it a couple of weeks ago, and they're all basically similar in concept. I think they work well together as 3 duos. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for being with us, and this was really fun, and I look forward to Left Hand.
There we go.
Next time. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks.